Hi there, class. I thought I would do an experiment today. I'm going to go over a couple of things from um, our learning this week. So I think I'll focus on sections 21.1 and 21.2. I'm not going to make this very long or very in-depth because I want to see what your feedback is. If you find this helpful, then maybe I'll do these more often, and if you don't find them helpful, I won't do them. um, all right, so of course, by the way, I hope everyone's doing okay, and please feel free to email me anytime. All right, so first thing I want to talk about is collective behavior. So this is one of those things that you all know, you just haven't had a name to put to it yet. So this is basically when a bunch of people are doing something at the same time, but it's not necessarily regulated. So examples of collective behavior could be if you're on your way to a concert and there's a whole bunch of people on the road who are all kind of doing the same thing, but not necessarily together, but they just happen to be doing the same thing. Or if a bunch of people, let's see, so this is before your time, but when I was in middle school, dyeing your hair like bleach blonde and getting, for men and getting both ears pierced was like very popular. So if as it was the case, a bunch of young people are all doing the same thing at the same time, even if they don't know each other. This could also be considered collective behavior. Um, Also, want to talk about crowds. There's considered to be four main types of crowds in our text. We've got casual crowds, so that's people who are in the same place at the same time, but not necessarily interacting. So um, if a bunch of people are waiting in line to buy tickets to a movie, some people still do that. A lot of people still buy tickets online now, but some people still buy them in person. So even if they're not necessarily interacting with one another, but they're all waiting in line. Or today, the Wisconsin election, I think, unfortunately, because it's feared that a lot of these people could get sick, but they had this election today, so a lot of people are out there standing in line. So even though they don't know each other, they're considered a casual crowd. Conventional crowd, these are people who come together for a specific event, like if you go to a concert or if you go to a religious event, that happens somewhat regularly. So let's say, one of your favorite local bands plays every Saturday at the bar down the street, or every Sunday morning you decide to go to church. Those would be kind of conventional crowds. Expressive crowds are people who come together to express an emotion, often after a celebration or a grieving, so perhaps like a wedding or a funeral. And then acting crowds, these focus on a specific goal. So in my own life, I've done these often for like protests. In 2017, no, I'll give you a more recent example. Just here in January, when the country was looking at whether or not to impeach our current president, I thought that was the right thing to do, so I went to several local protests, or I guess that would be considered a rally since we were supporting something. Um, so that would be an example of an acting crowd. We had a specific goal, and that was to promote impeachment. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to talk about, but it's a little bit expansive, is social movements. So some of the types of social movements and some of the levels of social movements. So you can have movements at, as small as one person. You can have movements as large as over, the whole world. And then of course all in between. And sometimes they can one can lead to another, right? Like there's this young woman, Greta Thunberg, I think is her name. You may have seen her in the news. she started just by herself. She was deeply moved in a negative way by the state of the environment and the lack of action that she felt uh, country governments were taking to protect the environment. So she, um, one day instead of going to school, she sat, I think, outside her. I don't know if it was local government or state government, but she sat outside some type of government, just had a sign, just her, and little by little, she garnered a lot of attention. And like I said, you've probably seen her in the news because she's become a global figure, not just in her country, but in ours. I think she was invited to speak um, at a lot of global events. So, it can go up and down. So, levels of movements. There's local, there's state, there's national, and there's global. Local movements could be, the example our textbook gives is in Chicago when there's been a lot of corruption, or I guess you could say even here in Maryland and Baltimore, there's been a lot of corruption. So there's often social movements that try to combat this. And I would say that's the case here. I've met a lot of people who are very unhappy with corruption in Maryland and try to combat that. So that could be at the local level, just in a city. And then there's state. So a few examples of movements at the state. In our state would be here in Maryland. There are groups of people who are working to do things like death with dignity. A lot of people that believe that doctors should be able to prescribe lethal amounts of medication when someone wants to take their lives. That could be if, like, let's say someone has cancer and the doctors have said, you absolutely have, I don't know, let's say 6 months to live and it's going to be extremely painful. A person might say, instead of kind of shriveling up and going in a lot of pain, I want to take my own life. So a lot of people believe that the person should have that right to do that. So that is something that people are currently trying to legalize at the state level. There's also recreational marijuana. A lot of people are trying to pass that in Maryland, and there is a movement at the state level to do that. So those are just a couple examples. And then national, you could say one example that the text gives is LGBT marriage. Obviously, this was a goal that was achieved. We don't have total equality. There are a lot of areas where LGBT people do not have equal rights, but we were able to achieve marriage equality at the national level. And then global, like I said, the environment is a great example of a global movement. There are a lot of people right now who believe that, well, it's not just their belief. I think it's something like 99.9% of scientists are in agreement that the path we are currently walking as on the earth is in trouble, right? The seas are rising, the amount of people who are having to leave their homes due to changing climate, the events. You've probably heard here in Maryland, in Ellicott City, we had two, I think they call them like once in a century storms, or once in however long. They're occurring more and more often. Things that are not supposed to be happening very often are happening often. More hurricanes, more devastating hurricanes. So a lot of people are very scared by the problems we face with the climate and are working to combat it. And another note I wanted to make is that a lot of these things can intersect and overlap. So, for example, gun violence prevention, I've probably talked with you all about. This is an issue that people are working on every level, local, state, national. I don't know that there's necessarily one solidified movement on the global level, but I would say it's definitely in the global consciousness. So I just wanted to make that note that they can intersect and overlap. Okay, and I think actually that might be a good place to stop. Like I said, I just wanted to test this out, see if you all thought it was helpful or not. So if you did think it was helpful, you enjoyed it, please send me an email and just let me know that, and I will do some more of them. And again, if you all aren't interested or this wasn't helpful, then I won't do them, and we will keep trying new things, okay? I hope everyone has a good a day as possible. I know these are really trying times, but I think we're all doing the best we can, and that's all we can do. So you all take care, and I look forward to being in touch soon.